So, Dr. Tom, your main focus of work is that you work with couples in the context of developmental psychology. Okay. So, how does this model differ from traditional relationship models and traditional relationship counseling? What is different about it? Yeah.
When I was doing my dissertation on couples, I was shocked how little research and how little small the models were. And on the ground, what I was doing with couples, I never had a model. I looked at object relations, I
Mhm.
looked at attachment theory, but none of the models seemed to address what I was responding to that couples needed. Like you and I know the structuring that relationships needed in terms of one couple does this, the other couple does that in a complementary, supportive way. I had no model. Even systems theory wasn't quite comprehensive enough to do it. And about 20 years ago, when I started reading integral theory, I
Mhm.
had that aha moment most of us do, where, oh my Lord, that's why I'm doing this. And all of a sudden, I had a lattice to hang upon everything I was actually doing in the consultation room. I'm sure you had that feeling, Dr. Shah, at
Yeah.
times also.
Yeah. Same. 3 years back. Yeah.
So this model is based upon, obviously the culture I've practiced in. And you can see these quadrants, the upper right, lower left, upper left, lower right. These are all quadrants. But if I was going to rewrite the marital vows, this is what I would write. Would you take the temper tantrums, the sensitivity, the overreactions, the insecurities, the character defects, the control issues, the unrealistic expectations we're going to touch on today, the
Mhm.
unresolved family issues, the uncontrolled regressions we're not going to touch on today. That's another presentation maybe we can do.
Mhm.
For better or for worse. At least they got the last part correct. For better or for worse, they were preparing us for. Because there's so many things that go into when a couple gets married. So, just very briefly, in the quadrants that Dr. Shah has probably taught you a little
Mhm.
bit on,
Yeah.
you can see the individual upper left, what goes on with you in your individual developmental history has a huge bearing upon how you show up in intimacy. How much exposure can you handle? I don't need to tell India about the cultural expectations.
Mhm.
Dr. Shah and my own research since we've spoke has shown me you're undergoing many things that the states did in the 60s in terms of the turmoil and the
Mhm.
changes. Your individual physiological response. I've seen a lot of couples that they say they want to be closer, but when they're that vulnerable and that transparent, you can see them physiologically retract as if they're in a danger situation. And then finally, the strength of the couple relationships. Have you seen that physiological response, Dr. Shah, in a
Yeah.
couple?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how that happens,
Mhm.
that you open them up and they pull back.
Mhm. Yeah. So,
So
mhm.
here's the quadrants I just showed you on the bottom, and here's the couple line. And this goes to the developmental history of the relationship. We each have our own individual developmental history, but the relationship too has a developmental history that most couples are going to go through. And it starts at the bottom, safety and attraction. It
Mhm.
moves automatically into roles as reality hits, meaning you begin to realize who you met isn't perfect. If you get good at the relationship, you turn to a relational level. And a relational level is a partnership level that India, my understanding, is beginning to experiment with
Mhm.
uh, great turmoil. And
Yeah.
that's what happened in the States and is still happening because you're going from roles that are assigned culturally to relational that's a partner love.
Mhm.
First love, I've spent a lot of time. How do you get to relational to first love? This is where the potential of the relationship takes off. And hopefully today we're going to have enough time that I can show you some steps to do it. And then there's spiritual love, the highest level that I've rarely seen. Should I keep going and explain these in more
Yeah.
detail?
Sure. Yeah. Sure, Dr. Tom. Yeah.
So now in cultures where you pick your own relationship, and sometimes I wonder if it's better. I do think it's better. It's incredible when we meet somebody. They're wonderful feelings of romantic love. There's powerful attraction, absorption, and it's really the projection of the ideal, meaning we're imagining love and the chemistry, the sexual chemistry going on. So the experience is, oh my God, I've met somebody so wonderful. And Dr. Shah, I'm sure you've had this experience on this type of relationship.
Yeah.
You ask them, tell me a few things wrong with the early relationship. They can barely think of anything.
Mm.
But 5 years down the road, they can write 5 pages what's wrong with them. And it's okay. It starts out as an ideal. And as we said, this emotional enthusiasm fueled by bodily sensation versus the much more developed empathy and understanding that doesn't happen till first love. If you watch romantic movies, I watch them with my wife, who's also a psychologist, just so we can see where the cultural expectation is at this point. And there's a pre-trans fallacy in this stage. And I wanted to find that. Do you remember the pre-trans fallacy, Dr. Shah?
Yeah, I remember it.
So it's the mistaken interpretation that a behavior, motive, or understanding originates from a highest stage of development, like safety and attraction. It's
Mm.
a mistaken interpretation. You don't even know the person. When you think of the language, love at first sight, well, it's a form of love, but it's more of a projected ideal. It occurs when one confuses emotional enthusiasm fired by bodily sensations with the much more developed capacities of empathy and understanding. And of course, that's where Ken Wilber developed in 2000. And this applies in many, many places.
Mm.
So, what gets us out of safety and attraction is time, usually a month, no more than 6 months, because we begin to realize that our partner is not perfect. They have a lot of their own issues. So, the imperfections combined with our own limitations, remember, individually, we all have our own limitations
Mm.
when it comes to handling intimacy. And now we got to move in. We got to begin to structure in the lower right all the roles we have to play. How do we function as husband and wife? How do we function as wife and mother? How do we have our self identity and the couple identity? And in this stage, I use the Christian tradition expulsion of from the Garden of Eden because you're getting thrown out of all that projected ideal. So we begin to build the relationship here. An immature couple breaks it off and they just assume there's something wrong. And there
Mm.
might be. Sometimes couples are mismatched. But with experience, if the person can problem solve, they can grow, they're growth oriented, they can control their emotions, they're emotionally available, there isn't anything wrong. You just got to get through the stages. So there's two persistent fantasies here. The fear that you made a partner selection mistake, and number two, that others perpetually live at safety and attraction. And a lot of the movies show that, boy meets girl, they have this wonderful love, and they live happily forever.
Mm.
And that's when my wife and I chuckle because we know there's a lot of work to do. And the cultural messages just have not gotten there yet. So that's role stage. If you survive this, and you often do, most couples are trying to get into the relational. Even here in the States, there's still traditional issues going on that
Mhm.
I understand that in India, you're really struggling with them, that fight out of there. And I
Mm.
do want to talk to the men specifically on this because it's a far better deal, the relational stage. I already said my wife is a psychologist, and one of the beauties of that stage is that economically,
Mm.
all the pressure wasn't on me. She helped me build everything we have. And
Mm.
it really helps to have a partner that can promote your growth. Do you find that true, Dr. Shah, too?
Yeah,
Is
yeah. In India,
Yeah,
it's happening now. Like both the couples, they are working together and they are contributing economically. So we are noticing that in this generation.
it really helps. It takes the pressure off of men, and you have time to have a life. And then if you don't get dumb about money, I'm often telling people, you got enough money, you don't have time. So you
Mm.
got to watch all that cultural junk and stuff, because the way a lot of societies are configured, the more the better. And
Mhm.
that's not true.
Yeah.
So in the role stage, I talked about a lot of this. This is a very reactive stage still. There's a lot of unfinished developmental issues. Couples confuse merger with communion. There's a difference. The womb is the most common entry point for intimacy. Something goes wrong. The couple really lets it all hang out with the regression. See, I said I was going to talk about regression, but there it is. Your partner hopefully goes, sweetie, I didn't mean to hurt you. Are you sure? Yeah, I didn't mean to hurt you. Well, you really did. And the couple moves on. They get vital supplies in that moment of wounded intimacy. But when you think about it, do we really want to use the wound as the entry point to closeness all the time? That happens all the time. We miss the other entry points all the time. It's amazing. So, that's why the tearful experience, due to the intimacy, it opens up. And there's regression I just touched on. I think you have a feeling, or decompensation, meaning occasionally a couple really falls apart, which is really painful.
Mhm.
So I already talked about the ideal, that
Mm.
projection of the ideal. And forgive me, I only have the Western influence
Mhm.
on this. Did I get the first one? Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the first one. I love this one in this cartoon. The couples together.
Mhm.
My ideal woman knows what the infield fly rule is. That's in baseball, the infield fly rule.
Mhm.
My ideal man knows what a credenza is and can lift it. In a moment in reality, they realize it's not going to happen
Mhm.
that easily, and they're left with that moment of despair. It is tough. This ideal, Dr. Shah, I'm sure on the idea of the men's movement,
Mm.
looking at men's ideals, and us men, we know what we do. We look at beautiful women, we go, whoa. And in reality, they're just people. And that's another projection. We still do it. I do it still. So on this cartoon, I'll tell you what, Millie, I'll start acting like the guys in your soap operas, when you start dressing like the girls in Victoria's Secret commercials. And in another moment, they know it's not going to happen. But I love this cartoon because we can see the ideal, especially the woman's ideal.
Mhm.
There's some research, Dr. Shah,
Mhm.
that show there's 20,000 women in America that read 20 or more romance novels a month.
Ooh.
That's women's pornography. I think the author, Dr. Warren Farrell. That's
Mhm.
his research that
Mhm.
shows that. But you can see what a woman's ideal is about. But it's getting more to the empathy and the reality of what each couple does on the relationship. Should I keep moving, or do you have a question in here?
No, you can keep moving. No problem. Yeah.
So, in the ideals,
Mhm.
we got to make sure the ideals don't contaminate contentment. Think of what I'm saying. Contentment is huge. It's much larger than happiness, contentment. And it's interesting, a meditative tradition like in India,
Mhm.
I'm mentioning the word contentment.
Mhm.
It is a very meditative thing. We already touched on women and men's ideals that could contaminate contentment. Ideals lead to distortion. They can be an aspiration when they're healthy because there are deeper love. Most people, they have the ability to imagine love far greater than they have the ability to help it come forth. Does that make sense what I'm saying there?
Yeah. Yeah. Very deep. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to really have a lot going to actually invoke love in the moment. And that's
Mhm.
what I'm doing, and I'll show you when we get to this first love. In a good relationship, the average minutes of love are about 5 minutes a day. where you actually feel love. Love's not a constant. Commitment is the only constant there is. Nobody, not even in the spiritual love, do they feel it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because they got to focus on other things. So
Mm.
you can see the deconstruction of the ideal, because the nonsense running through the culture is unbelievable. And here's that comes out of psychoanalytic theory, the golden fantasy.
Mm.
And we all have it. I still have it. If she loved me, she would know what I need. If he loved me, he would know what I need. So you can see how much lower left work there's to do is to challenge the prevailing ideals is huge. So my understanding and into here, the younger generation is moving here.
Yeah.
It is going to be good for everyone, but the turmoil is huge. In the States, it began to appear in 64. Feminism, environmentalism. I mean, feminism is still driving the traditionalists nuts here. In my opinion, it's part of the reason why we elected Trump again, which I still haven't recovered from. The beauty is the functional interactional patterns include problem solving and flexible relationships. I like the metaphor we use is the cream rises to the top and there's different skills levels. So like when we travel, I can't find my way out of my driveway. I am so geographically dysfunctional, but my wife takes over and I drive, she navigates, and all these functional patterns come up. But even at the relational stage, those two fantasies exist. I'm afraid I made a partner selection mistake, and others get to live as safety and attraction because the cultural message is still unchallenged, even here. So relational is good. Regression's done well. And if we do this again, we can do the adult child model.
Yeah.
Here, spatting, meaning a couple growls at each other, they move away from each other. They don't make a mess. That comes out of John Gottman's work. So there's a quick recovery. They don't use that wound as a focus in that moment. So they're doing things really quite well. Of course, there's ruptures in connection, but they can compartmentalize, meaning they expect it to happen. They just roll their eyes, don't get caught rolling your eyes, and they move on. We already touched on the integrated roles.
Mm.
There's give and take. There's problem solving. This couple is doing well overall. A lot of people, when they get to this stage, couples therapy is a success, but they haven't tapped first love.
Mm.
They still have that fantasy. Even though they have feelings of love here and there, they don't know where to go.
Mm.
And it's interesting because I know, Dr. Shah, you're aware of how much Western psychologies tap in the Eastern traditions to
Yeah.
understand mindfulness and the
Mm.
meditative and living in an abundance. And the beauty that's happening is the West meeting the East, and we're incorporating it in
Mm.
both traditions. It's exactly what the model said were going to happen
Mm.
as we went along.
Yeah. Mm.
Should I keep going?
Yeah, yeah, you can explain the entire model. Yeah.
So, getting into first love,
Mm.
and I promise I'll show you how to do this,
Mhm.
or some of the steps on how to do this. But in first love, when you begin to achieve it, and it's not like throwing on a light switch. Even in my relationship with my wife, and I wrote all this stuff. I know this about as well as anyone. And we talk about it is we go from relational and we float into first love here and there multiple times a day, like through the holidays, looking at all the work my wife did. And when she creates family events, my God, my love for her just flourishes. I'm just so grateful because one, I don't think I could ever do it on my own. It's her gift and the things she constructs. And I look at her and I'm cheating a little bit. What I do is I smile and I go, and she knows I'm acknowledging her gift. She smiles back at me. And I love when my children see that because we're modeling what it is. So in first love, we're free from the pull of the fantasy of safety and attraction. Those fantasies. And to you men out there, I can still look at a beautiful woman and go, whoa. Usually when they begin to talk, I go, been there and done that. I don't want to do that again. Because with that package comes earlier developmental stages. I've already done those. I don't want to do them again. So it's not that that goes away, it's that it
Mhm.
gets channeled into more. In first love, in that level of exposure and transparency, you've got to be able to calm the physiological reaction. And one of my colleagues in Israel, his name's escaping me, sorry,
Mhm.
he has a wonderful example of this. He goes, when man climbed out of the tree, the one that sat at the base of the tree went, this is a lot more comfortable, got eaten by an animal. The
Mhm.
ones that did this went on and survived, and they
Mhm.
bred over and over again. And we know, Dr. Shah, at the cognitive level, when you look at the average person,
Mhm.
certainly if they don't have meditative traditions, their cognition looks like this. It's that hypervigilance, obsessive, normal levels of obsession and compulsion. They don't even reach DSM-5, but they're not desirable. It's incredible.
Mhm.
We are calming the physiology. Now, at first thought, we can drop into the other stages. We can drop into the role stages like I'm better at fixing things. My wife becomes a gopher, meaning she goes and gets tools and she doesn't ask questions at that point. I know what I'm doing. Then conversely, the other way around, there's areas of expertise like in diagnostics. She's actually a neuropsychologist. When
Mhm.
it comes to test interpretation, I listen. She knows what she's doing. But this concept of living in the abundance, and 85%, I want you to remember, because this is how you're going to learn how to get there
Mhm.
in doing that. In first love, of course, there's shadow and unconscious material, but this couple expects it and they don't panic. They don't go like sometimes when I make a mistake and I overexpose somebody, they go in front of their couple, they regress into, I don't do it all the time. You do it sometimes too. And you can feel their overexposure. The physiology just went through the roof. And then you're late for your next appointment because you made a mistake developmentally where they were. Have you ever done that, Dr. Shah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's painful because it's not good for them or anything. So there's an ability to look at yourself in front of one significant other. That's huge. That's why at these integral conferences, it's easier with a stranger to do an eye contact exercise
Mhm.
to enter we space than it is your intimate partner. The hardest place to do it is with your intimate partner, even though that sounds like a contradiction. We see that everywhere. My wife, when she first started Integral, initially she said, Tom, I don't want to be in a group with you. You know those practice groups, Dr. Shah?
Mhm. Yeah.
She would say, I wanted, and she was developing mastery before she did it with me. And I was fine. Now she goes, Tom, will you be in my group? Because she's comfortable with it. She wants me to be there with her and she wants to show me how much she's done. So at this stage, we accept the ruptures in connection. Of course, there's going to be crap happens. It's just the way it is. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to be irritable with each other here and there, but you don't catastrophize. We compartment There's compartmentalization of wounds created by the partner. Now, this is not denial. It's just acceptance of, sweetie, you shouldn't have raised that. Oh, God, I'm sorry, honey. Please don't do that. Oh, you got it. I'm sorry, sweetie. So you see, we're moving on. The wound
Mhm.
isn't defining the process. That rarely happens. If I'm in a supermarket, I can tell a couple that's in trouble. It's like you can just feel the problems. So here, this second tier capabilities, and you know this, Dr. Shar, from
Mhm.
that on developmental lines and all of them, you can get the second tier And even in this model, let me skip ahead real quick to show
Yeah.
this again. So Dr. Shah knows this with me. This
Mm.
tracks spiral dynamics.
Yeah.
And I know some of you saw Martin Usik's presentation, and he actually uses spiral dynamics in couples. And
Mm.
notice the colors, they track because all these developmental lines line up next to each other. That's the brilliance of integral theory, is we actually have a lattice of to develop this. And so when I developed this, I understood at a couple level, I had enough experience with couples to actually interpret what are the actual dynamics showing up at each level here. And so at a spiral dynamic level, that's a values model, the one that we all widely use. You can see the applicability, and every couple has multiple lines. And
Mm.
depending upon your height, it shows up in the relationship of how you do that.
Yeah.
All right, but we're back in first love still, and we're going to talk about how you get there. And please hear the Eastern contributions to this. This is where the West is going, oh my God, you people figured this out 4,000 years ago?
Mm.
And it's the mindfulness of the abundance that's always here. You can feel it. Some of you may be feeling me open that space now. You can feel the abundance if you're mindful of physiologically where you are, the wonderfulness of just being. So one of my observation is a halfway decent couple can do 85% of their relationship well. And it's the 15% wrong that becomes 80% of how they evaluate the relationship. We
Mm.
call that an integral, their state experience. They're feeling the state of their relationship. Do you see how messed up that is?
Yeah. Mm.
And I'm sure you've had this experience that
Yeah.
hypervigilance causes a focus on the 15%.
Mm.
So individually, if they're not developed, and then understand the applicability to the couple, then the relationship is going to suffer on it.
Mm.
So that's what happens. And just real quick, I'm going to do spiritual, then I'll show you how to get there.
Yeah.
I've never seen a couple that's spiritual love.
Mm.
I'm taking all that developmental data I understand, and I'm estimating what it is. Do you know Jeff Saltzman
Yeah.
in Boulder?
Yeah.
He told me him and Chuck are actually at Spiritual Love, and I tried to do an interview with both of them. He hasn't done it yet because I said, "Well, let's do an interview together. We'll post it."
Mm.
And I did meet Chuck last May in Boulder at the conference and the Icon conference that all of you are welcome to attend online in 2026.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if there actually are there.
Mm.
But this is rarefied ground. Both members are deeply into second tier capabilities. They can bring it. Now, notice, of course, there's the deficiencies. They explore them without catastrophizing. Both people take ownership and they integrate them. Transparency and communing is easy. They're not overreacting to the exposure. They can go, whoa, I didn't see that. Let me get my breath. Whoa.
Mm.
See what I mean? The physiology isn't kicking in. The cognition is running the show. And they're signaling their partner, how do you react in this moment? Yeah, yeah, I'm glad you see that. Do you need a moment? No, that was great. Can you see more? Do you see more? We call that joint witnessing. Witnessing is what the Asians developed. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Mhm.
The joint witnessing serves to open space greater than either can achieve alone because they're at the same wavelength going, what do you got? See more, open more. Oh my God, that's wonderful because they're actually there. Excuse me. In non-intimate relationships, we're building Icon 2026 right now. Excuse me. And we developed a co-creation committee, Dr.
Mhm.
Shah.
Yeah.
And Layman Pascal's on it. Have you seen Layman's work?
Yeah.
Amazing people.
Mhm.
Dr. Walsh. Um, Jill Thomas, my partner, um, she's on it, and Shara Masinska. These people can open space. This is second tier
Mm,
capacity. And the idea of the co-creation committee is looking at what do we want to do next time? Can we actually think into the complexity of it so it shows up in a very complicated, integrated way? It was an amazing experience and having those people together. I mean, we finished our work last week and
mhm,
we were like, do we really want to break this up? Of course, we have to because we got to bring it to committee level now. But it was extraordinary being with people like that. Intimacy is going to be the hardest part to get there. So just to finish this, to
mhm,
because I love people getting this intellectually
mhm,
because it exceeds their potential. So at this level, intuition and those subtle energies always with us, heightened presence during peak experiences of love. That is a multiple because you're aware you're in Rumi's field where words aren't necessary. You can feel it. Some of you out there can feel the space Dr. Shah and I are opening.
mhm,
That's subtle energy. We learned it from the Eastern traditions.
mhm,
So ongoing creativity advances into novelty. You hear the Whitehead contributions, the experiences of the beloved. So you don't want to get depressed on that.
mhm,
You felt it. Imagine
mhm.
and remember, we all have the ability to imagine love greater than we can do. I'm not sure I could even do spiritual love.
Yeah.
Although with a stranger, I can enter we space
Mhm.
and do that. So,
Yeah.
have I explained enough about developmental?
Yeah, like this model sounds really interesting and fascinating. I'm sure that our audience has never heard about it, and like it's very comprehensive and takes all the factors of a human being into consideration.